Welcome back to Transcriber from Reddit. Today's topic comes from the subreddit WomenInNews, posted by user Sijonya. The post contains a linked article. The title of the post reads, quote, "Comfort Women," end quote, or sex slaves. Why the debate over this World War II term remains so complicated. The tag for this post is bright pink, reading Women's Rights. And as of recording, this has only 594 upvotes and 159 comments. Before I cover the article, I want to cover some of the comments. First, posted by user BR4ZEN. Here the E is substituted with a 3. BU77 comments, "Comfort women, joy division, sex slaves, they are all synonyms. There is nothing complicated about it all." In response, user That Snarky Femme says, "It is only difficult for people that don't want to acknowledge what happened." Another user, War Weasel, asks, "Is that what Joy Division is named after?" User BR4Z3NBU77 responds with, "Sadly, yes. The Joy Division was what the Nazis called the Jewish girls and women they kept as sex slaves." These are what I consider to be the top comments, because even today, people disagree with what sex slavery and what euphemisms such as comfort women, joy division, and so on and so forth, and whether those euphemisms or the term sex slaves, which should be used. Some people prefer the euphemisms because they can't handle the reality of women selling their bodies, being forced to sell their bodies, or, at the very worst of it, being raped repeatedly against their will. In all of these cases, you cannot assume that they have or are able to give consent, because consent indicates that you are able to agree to it without being forced into it due to people forcing you into it in person, due to economic circumstances forcing you into it. Keep all of this in mind as I continue to read. The article was posted on the website theconversation.com. The title reads, quote, "Comfort Women," end quote, or sex slaves. Why the debate over this World War II term remains so complicated. It was published on June 6, 2024, by author Ming Gao, who, as we can see here, is a researcher at Monash University. And underneath reads the disclosure statement, Ming Gao is affiliated with the Australian Catholic University. I begin reading the article. In April 1941, a group of Japanese invading forces in China gang-raped Zhao Runmai in northern Shaanxi province. The soldiers had first killed Zhao's foster parents in front of her, stabbing her father's throat with a bayonet and slashing the back of her mother's head. And then the attack on her began. Zhao was then taken to a blockhouse to be raped daily, a horror that lasted for more than 40 days. She was just 16 years old. More than 80 years later, the children of 18 now deceased Chinese, quote, "comfort women," end quote, including Zhao's family, have filed the first ever lawsuit, linked here, in China against Japan for alleged crimes committed during the Second World War. The plaintiffs are seeking financial compensation of up to 2 million Chinese yuan, parentheses, around 416,000 American dollars, end parentheses, each, and a formal public apology for the abuses the women allegedly endured, such as kidnapping, detention, rape, torture, and the spreading of sexually transmitted diseases. Aside from the legal and political implications of the case, it has also reopened a complex debate over identity and language. The term, quote, comfort women, end quote, has long been used to describe these victim-survivors, but many reject the term and prefer what they believe is a more accurate description, sex slaves. Below that is a screen grab from X, formerly known as Twitter, posted by user Critical Asian Studies, or at Critic Asian STDS, that reads, commentary. Ming Gao explains the background and significance of a recent lawsuit filed in China by 17 surviving Chinese, quote, comfort women, end quote, against the Japanese government, noting its potential for reinvigorating China's movement for comfort women's justice. Below that is a link to what is noted as commentary, Ming Gao, Historical Justice on Trial. Section, rejecting, quote, comfort women, end quote, as a label. One thing we know for certain is the deceased women in Shaanxi did not agree with being labeled, quote, comfort women, end quote, according to a book published by Zhang Shuangbing, who has been campaigning for their justice for decades. The book, side note, the book is linked to Zhang Shuangbing's name that's linked here in this article. I continue reading. Another survivor of that time, Jan O'Hearn, the daughter of a Dutch sugar plantation owner in Indonesia, who was forced into a Japanese brothel during the war, likewise rejected the term, quote, comfort women, end quote. She advocated for the use of, quote, sex slaves, end quote, or, quote, war rape victims, end quote, instead. While the term, quote, sex slaves, end quote, may carry connotations of dehumanization, many believe it is a more appropriate term for several reasons. First, advocates in China and South Korea, the two countries believed to have the greatest number of wartime sex slaves, have increasingly used this term in their respective languages, parentheses, Xingnuli in Chinese and Songnoyi in Korean, end parentheses. In recent years, Su Jiliang, linked here, a prominent professor of, quote, comfort women, end quote, / sex slaves studies in China, has advocated for the use of the term because it more accurately conveys the nature of sexual abuse the women endured. Here is another screenshot of a post on X, formerly Twitter, by user Luna Lin, or at Luna and Lin, that reads, my humble suggestion, before writing the entirely predictable hot take that Chinese people are all brainwashed by government propaganda vilifying Japan and Abe with quotes from people who do not have expertise in CN-JP relations, WWII history, or JP politics, reach out to, and here they link one of their posts, again, at Luna and Lin, that reads, Su Jiliang, China's top, quote, comfort women, end quote, researcher at Shanghai Normal University, who has done the most extensive work collecting testimonies from Chinese victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. Below that is a link to an Amazon.com to a book that's titled Chinese Comfort Women, Testimonies from Imperial Japan's Sex Slaves, parentheses, Oxford Oral History Series, end parentheses. I continue reading. In recent times, the term sex slaves has also appeared more frequently in public discourse. Linked here. The Chinese state news agency Xinhua uses the term because it reflects the, quote, nature of the sin, end quote, according to a statement reprinted by the State Council of China. Linked here. Similarly, the Korean Council, one of the most active NGOs seeking redress for Korean victims, also supports the use of the term sex slaves because it connotes, quote, the essence of the crime of, quote, slavery, end quote, and overall, quote. The term sex slaves, parentheses, or sexual slavery victims, end parentheses, has also been widely adopted by the United Nations since its first investigative report, linked here, on the issue in 1996. In the report, the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women noted the Japanese government's rejection of the term, quote, slavery, end quote, but added that she, quote, considers the case of women forced to render sexual services in wartime by and/or for the use of armed forces a practice of military sexual slavery, end quote. Then, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton concurred in 2012 when she reportedly said, quote, enforced sex slaves, end quote, is a more appropriate description. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the term sex slaves more accurately describes what these women experienced, as opposed to the misleading term, quote, comfort women, end quote. The term, quote, comfort women, end quote, which comes from the Japanese word yanfu, parentheses, shows the characters in Japanese, end parentheses, which literally means, quote, comforting, consoling woman, end quote, papers over the true nature of the abuse. Below, we have another screenshot of a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, posted by user #Women'sArt, which is in all caps, or @Women'sArt1. The post reads, quote, Comfort Women Wanted, end quote, series by Korean-born artist Chang Jin Lee to remember 200,000 young women referred to as, quote, comfort women, end quote, who were systematically exploited as sex slaves in Asia during World War II. Raising awareness of sexual violence against women during wartime. #Women'sArt. Below that is an image, a photo taken of two posters by this Korean-born artist, Chang Jin Lee. The first one on the left is a red poster with a black border around it that showcases at the center of it a photo of a living room with the outline of a woman. We don't actually see the woman's face because the woman's profile is completely covered in red. At the top of that center photo are the words comfort women. Below it is the word wanted. The poster on the right has a similar format to the poster on the left. Red background, black border. In this case, the central photograph is of a young woman with her face facing towards the camera, looking completely sober and sad against a gold background. Above her photo reads the words comfort women. Below her photo reads the word wanted. I continue reading the article. The term sex slaves also feels more inclusive. It can be used to describe women from different cultural and national backgrounds with dramatically different experiences. It also broadens the scope of various types of sexual violence perpetrated against women during Japan's colonization and occupation of various parts of Asia. The deceased Chinese women in the Shaanxi lawsuit case illustrate this point. They did not fit neatly within the description of Korean, quote, comfort women, end quote. However, their experiences were similar. They were subjected to sexual abuse in military, quote, blockhouses, end quote, and not permitted to leave. To escape, their impoverished relatives had to pay a ransom. Next section. Debate is likely to continue. The Japanese government has vehemently rejected the use of the term, quote, sex slave, end quote, arguing, linked here, quote, that claims such as, quote, forceful taking away of comfort women by the Japanese military and government authorities, end quote, several hundred thousands of comfort women existed, end quote, and, quote, sex slaves, end quote, are not recognized as historical facts, end overall quote. The Japanese government continues, linked here, to use the phrase, quote, comfort women, end quote, in its official statements. In South Korea, the term, quote, comfort women, end quote, also still predominates, linked here, in official circles. The reasons are complex. For one, the term has become widely accepted in South Korea, making it difficult to change, and reaching an agreement with the surviving women on other terminology is not easy. It remains a topic of considerable debate, linked here. Below that, we see a photograph taken with multiple people in it, young and old, men and women, with signs in Korean. It looks like they're out on a rainy day, and it looks like they're protesting. Below the photograph is the caption, former South Korean, quote, comfort woman, end quote, Lee Young-soo, parentheses, sitting, end parentheses, at a rally outside the presidential office in Seoul in May, Jeon Hyun-kyun /EPA. As a scholar of modern East Asia and the former Japanese Empire, I understand that each term carries unique connotations and historical baggage. Side note, I believe the author also means to use the word denotations. I continue reading. Regardless of how these women and countless others who suffer wartime sexual violence today are viewed, the issue will continue to resonate politically and historically. That, it seems, remains unchanged. The tags below this article read as follows: Japan, China, World War II, South Korea, comfort women, and sexual slavery. This concludes the article. As always, I encourage you to do your own research regarding this topic. I am covering this because it is not that often talked about, and it needs to be talked about more, and more people need to cover the fact that women historically have always suffered sexual abuses, and the fact that it's trying to be addressed today, regardless of the politics behind it, is a good thing. It needs to be addressed, and compensation, at the very least, needs to be given to these women and to the families of these women. But tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching and listening, and I will see you in the next one.